What if the system shaping the modern world was not something that suddenly appeared, but something that was described long before it ever existed? Not as a nation, not as a single ruler, not as a moment in time, but as something far more complex, a system. One that influences economies, shapes culture, and quietly connects the world beneath the surface. In the book of Revelation, there is a name that appears with unusual weight. Not just as a place, but as a symbol, a mystery. Babylon. For centuries, its meaning has been debated. Was it a literal city? A historical empire? A metaphor for corruption or power? Because the description doesn't behave like a simple label. It doesn't point clearly to one location. Instead, it describes something expansive, something global, something deeply influential, something woven into the structure of how the world functions. And for most of history, that description remained difficult to define. But today, for the first time, the world may finally provide the context needed to understand what that symbol represents. The text does not simply call it Babylon. It calls it Mystery Babylon. And that distinction matters. Because a mystery, in this context, is not something meant to remain hidden forever. It is something revealed progressively, only when the conditions exist to understand it. For generations, people tried to interpret Babylon through the lens of the past. Ancient empires, historic civilizations, fallen powers. But none of those interpretations fully match the description. Because the text points beyond something local. It describes something with reach. Something that extends across nations. Influences leadership. Shapes the behavior of entire populations. Not confined, but distributed. Not isolated, but integrated. One of the most limiting assumptions is thinking Babylon must be a physical place. A city on a map. A location that can be identified. But the description moves beyond geography. It speaks of influence over kings, merchants, nations. It describes economic reach, cultural impact, systemic influence. This is not the language of location. It is the language of structure. A network. A framework. A system that operates across boundaries. And in today's world, that kind of system is no longer theoretical. It exists. To understand this, you have to look at how the world actually functions. Not on the surface, but beneath it. Global economies are interconnected. Markets respond instantly to each other. Supply chains stretch across continents. Trade flows continuously between nations. But beneath that activity, there is structure. Financial institutions, corporate ecosystems, digital infrastructures, all connected, all interdependent. This is not random interaction. It is organized, layered, engineered for efficiency. And the more integrated it becomes, the more influence it holds over how the world operates. One of the most consistent themes in the description of Babylon is commerce. Buying, selling, wealth. Not as a side element, but as a central force. And that is significant. Because in the modern world, economic systems do more than facilitate exchange. They shape behavior. Markets influence decisions. Corporations shape policy. Financial systems guide participation. And when these systems operate globally, their reach becomes universal. Not enforced through visibility, but through necessity. Because participation in the system becomes required for normal life. But Babylon is not only economic. It is cultural. It influences what people value, what they pursue, what they accept as normal. And it does this not through force, but through exposure, through media, through information, through repetition. Ideas spread rapidly. Trends become global. Perspectives align. And over time, culture begins to reflect the system influencing it. Not because it is imposed, but because it is absorbed. Gradually, continuously, almost invisibly. One of the most subtle characteristics of this system is that it preserves the feeling of independence. People believe they are choosing freely. But those choices are shaped by available options, by design systems, by structured environments. Because when a system defines the boundaries, it also defines the possibilities within those boundaries. And when everything is interconnected, true independence becomes increasingly complex. Not removed, but limited, conditioned, aligned with the system itself. Throughout history, systems have always moved in a predictable direction toward centralization. Small systems merge into larger ones. Local influence expands into global influence. Power concentrates over time. This pattern is not new. But historically, it was restricted by geography, by communication, by technological limitation. Today, those restrictions are gone. And that changes the scale entirely. Because centralization is no longer regional. It is global. When you take the description of Babylon and place it alongside the structure of the modern world, the parallels become difficult to dismiss. A system with global reach, economic influence that shapes behavior, cultural power that aligns perception, interconnected networks that operate as one. This does not require forced interpretation. It reveals alignment. Not necessarily completion, but formation. The conditions described now exist. This is not about identifying a single entity or assigning labels. It is about understanding systems. Because systems determine outcomes. They influence decisions. They define access. They shape the environment people operate within. And when a system becomes global, its influence becomes unavoidable. Not because it forces participation immediately, but because it becomes the structure through which participation happens. What makes this moment historically unique is not just the presence of these systems. It is their convergence. Economic systems, technological systems, cultural systems, all integrating, all aligning, all moving toward a unified structure. And when multiple systems converge, they create something more powerful than any one system alone. They create dependency. This is not about fear. It is about clarity. Understanding how systems evolve. Recognizing patterns as they emerge. And thinking critically about where those patterns lead. Because once a system becomes fully embedded, it becomes extremely difficult to step outside of it. Not because it is enforced immediately, but because it becomes essential. For centuries, Babylon remained a symbol without full context. A mystery that could be interpreted, but not fully understood. Because the world itself was incomplete. But today, that is beginning to change. Not perfectly. Not entirely. But clearly enough to recognize the pattern. And that recognition shifts everything. Because we are no longer asking what Babylon was. We are beginning to understand what it is becoming. And if this system is already taking shape, then the next question becomes unavoidable. How does it connect to control and participation? Because the system itself is only the framework. What it requires is what gives it power. Watch the next video. Because that's where everything connects. And once you understand that connection, you won't just see the system, you'll understand how it operates. And if you want to keep seeing what most people overlook, subscribe. Because this is only the beginning.